quite a few misconceptions about the Catholic priesthood. So here are just 3 of them. Misconception number 1, priests are not happy. Now, certainly, there could be priests that experience anxiety and depression and loneliness and all those normal human things, but it's a gross generalization that's simply patently false. In fact, in 2011, a very well-researched book came out on the question of why priests are happy. And there was extensive research done on this topic from a host of different platforms, from the physiological to the psychological to the spiritual, and it compiled all these statistics on that question, and it found that Catholic priests in the United States are by and large and by many measures happier than the general public. So it was actually very interesting not just to hear that statement, but to actually see why. And among all the many reasons for it, there's a joy in simply belonging to God at the level of the mind, body, and spirit. And so this actually correlates very well with what priests promise in poverty, chastity, and obedience of life, to live a simple life, a humble life, a life that's obedient to Christ and to the bishop, and to live a life of evangelical witness to the gospel. So there is a real joy, not just for priests, but for people in general, to belong more and more wholly and entire to God. And so, among other things, priests are actually very happy by and large. We're always human, by the way, experience highs and lows, but by and large, if you were to ask priests, they will find that they're, by and large, very happy, joyful people, and there's a joy to belonging in God. Okay, misconception number 2. Priests simply have to be celibate by mandate of the church. So this is a common misconception. It's partly true, of course. So to be a Catholic priest, the church actually mandates celibacy. However, it's not merely a top-down or one-way street of like, oh, I just have to begrudgingly, have to be celibate because the church demands it. No, did you know that to be a Catholic priest often entails celibacy, but it has to be freely and willingly chosen? This is sometimes what a lot of people don't understand. Sometimes when I'm walking around town or around Dinkytown as a priest, some people will ask questions, and sometimes they'll say like, gosh, don't you just wish that you could be married? Won't the church change on this topic? And it's a very big surprise to them when I say something like this: I chose this. And they say like, what? Why would you do this? So this is a common misconception that yes, the Catholic Church does mandate, in a certain sense, priests in the Roman Catholic Church to be celibate. However, and again, it's not simply a one-way or top-down way of thinking. Priests actually have to willingly and cheerfully accept it for all that it is. And so this is really out of the pattern of Jesus himself, who was a celibate man. He lived completely for the Father. He lived in heaven. So there's plenty of reasons for why of celibacy, but there's 3 main ones. One, to have an undivided heart, to be completely united with God. Whereas if I were married or something else, you would have a lot of divisions in your life, a lot of big responsibilities. So a priest can live with an undivided heart by belonging whole and entire to God. Second reason for celibacy is actually a freedom for service. This comes most naturally for people to understand, like, okay, I get it, your schedule can be more freed up, but it's true. We can be completely given over to service because we're living in this very open way of living for God and for his people and the needs of his people. And then third and final reason for why celibacy is an eschatological witness, which simply means the eschaton, which means last things or heaven. Priests are to witness to the fact that there is a reality greater than the visible world, and that's called heaven. And so priests are to live celibate in a way that would be, you can't really understand priests unless you say like there has to be heaven, because they're living completely for it. So in terms of why celibacy, those are just a few of the reasons, but the all-encompassing error or misconception is that it's simply a one-way street. The priests have to be celibate by mandate, but it's also a choice. And so hopefully that helps you see a little bit of why it's a misconception. Okay, misconception number 3. Priests only work on Sundays. Now think of it, there's plenty of good reasons for why people might think this. Most people that come to Mass on Sundays, and when they see the priest, only see the priest on Sundays. So they don't often see the priest throughout the week. And so there can be a misconception of, well, I don't really think the father does a whole lot. It'd be kind of like saying this to a stay-at-home mom of 5 kids. What do you do all day? Do you just kind of like lay around? Do the kids serve you? She would get rightfully very irritated and might even slap you. So similarly for priests, think about priests are fathers of families. They're shepherds of souls. And there are literally thousands and thousands of people entrusted to the care and responsibility of the father, of the priest. And so think about all the various needs that people have in the complicated way of living life, especially with directing our souls to God. So people are born and people die. Those would be the sacraments of baptism. Those would be celebrating masses and funerals for people. Jesus says to the priest, do this in memory of me. So priests celebrate Mass every day. Think about all the needs of people, especially when people sin. People sin, I don't know if you know this, and sometimes they sin a lot. And so God wants to give his mercy as often and as frequently as possible through the sacrament of confession. And so priests hear a lot of confessions every day. I have confessions every day. So they celebrate Mass, they celebrate confessions, they walk with people through all the ins and outs of their life. People going through the high joys and sorrows and sufferings of life, priests walk with everyone through those things. So often priests have their calendar filled with meetings with people. Then, of course, there's the administrative things. There's buildings and there's bills and there's banks and all these kinds of things. Sometimes it is a little bit of a headache, but priests are to be responsible for the material goods of the church. And so thankfully we have usually great staff that help us out with this, so we don't do this alone. But priests stay fairly full in their schedules throughout the week to be able to care and walk with people to the way of salvation. So hopefully these few things clear up a few, not all by any means, but a few of some common misconceptions about the Catholic priesthood. God bless you.